Not every tractor is built to be a legend. Some end up on the wrong side of history. In fact, a few were so poorly designed, so unreliable, and so frustrating to operate that farmers couldn't get rid of them fast enough. From underpowered engines and clunky transmissions to mechanical nightmares that spent more time in the shop than in the field, these are the machines that missed the mark entirely. Whether it was a bad idea from the start or a promising design ruined by execution, these tractors have earned their spot on this list for all the wrong reasons. Today we're counting down the 15 worst tractors of all time. The models nobody wants back, and for good reason. Some were dangerous, others were just plain useless. But all of them share one thing in common. They failed the farmers who depended on them. Buckle up, because you won't believe how bad some of these tractors really were. Number 15. The Long 2610 was a tractor that promised functionality but delivered disappointment in nearly every category. Released with minimal innovation and built under license from Universal in Romania, the 2610 suffered from outdated engineering even upon arrival. Its three-cylinder diesel engine, while simple, was severely underpowered for the mid-range utility segment, often struggling under moderate workloads. Reliability issues plagued its electrical systems, hydraulic leaks were common, and the gear shifts felt clunky and imprecise, hardly ideal for fieldwork requiring finesse. Ergonomics were virtually an afterthought, with a cramped operator station, poor visibility, and minimal comfort features, making long hours in the seat a miserable experience. Worse still, parts availability was a nightmare. Even basic maintenance became a chore without access to proper support, especially in rural markets. As competition improved with more refined offerings from John Deere and Massey Ferguson, the Long 2610 felt like a relic, slow, clumsy, and grossly outdated. Its low price may have tempted budget-conscious buyers, but many quickly learned that any upfront savings were soon wiped out by constant downtime and repair costs. Ultimately, the 2610 became a cautionary tale of what happens when cost-cutting overrides quality, and its legacy is one of regret more than reliability. Number 14. The Minneapolis Moline G1355 was a textbook example of good intentions undermined by poor execution, leaving behind a legacy more frustrating than formidable. Introduced in the early 1970s as a high-horsepower workhorse, it was essentially a rebadged Oliver 2255, stuffed with a massive 540 cubic inch Caterpillar V8 diesel engine that was better suited for construction equipment than row crop farming. While the power was impressive on paper, the engine's thirst for fuel and tendency to overheat under sustained loads made it wildly inefficient and unreliable in real-world conditions. The rear end and drivetrain, inherited from earlier Oliver designs, were simply not engineered to handle the torque from such a beastly engine, leading to frequent mechanical failures, especially in the final drives and differential. The G1355's controls were awkwardly placed, visibility was compromised by the massive engine hood, and its sheer weight made soil compaction a recurring issue. Even basic tasks like cold starts became a nightmare in cooler climates due to the engine's sensitivity. Minneapolis Moline was already struggling by the time this model debuted, and the G1355 did nothing to help. It came off as a desperate parts bin mashup rather than a thoughtfully engineered tractor. Today it stands as a cautionary emblem of mismatched components and unrealized potential, remembered more for what went wrong than anything it did right. Number 13. The Steiger Puma 1000 was one of the more baffling missteps in tractor design during the early 1980s, a time when Steiger was known for rugged, high-horsepower machines built for serious field work. Not this awkward compromise. Introduced during a period of financial strain, the Puma 1000 was a smaller, articulated tractor meant to appeal to mid-sized operations, but it fell flat on nearly every front. Its 140 horsepower Chalmer's 6-cylinder diesel engine was underwhelming for a four-wheel drive platform, and its lack of low-end torque made heavy tillage a frustrating wheel-spinning experience. The articulation system, meant to offer maneuverability, was jerky and imprecise at low speeds, creating more operator fatigue than efficiency. Visibility from the cab was poor. The controls were scattered in a way that felt like an afterthought, and creature comforts were virtually non-existent compared to competitors offering refined operator environments. Worse yet, the drivetrain components were overbuilt for the engine or underbuilt for real work, resulting in parts that were either needlessly expensive or prone to failure depending on the application. The Puma 1000 felt like a confused experiment, too light for the Steiger faithful, too crude for new buyers, and too compromised to make a lasting impact. In hindsight, it was the right idea delivered in all the wrong ways. Number 12. The Massey Ferguson 2000 was a bold misfire that tried to reinvent the high horsepower game and ended up tripping over its own ambition. Built in the 1970s as part of MF's push into the four-wheel drive articulated market, the 2000 looked impressive with its enormous frame and imposing stance. But underneath that size lay a host of poor decisions. It was powered by a thirsty and temperamental Caterpillar V8 diesel that generated massive heat and required constant attention, making reliability a daily concern rather than an occasional worry. The tractor's hydraulic system was finicky, the articulation joints wore quickly, and the steering was slow and vague, especially at higher speeds. Despite its size, it struggled with traction and power transfer due to a mismatched drivetrain that seemed never fully tuned for the engine's output. Operator comfort was almost non-existent. The cab was noisy, visibility was compromised by the long hood, and controls felt unrefined even by 1970s standards. Maintenance access was a chore, and parts support became a nightmare after MF pulled the plug on the big articulated experiment. The 2000 was supposed to mark Massey Ferguson's entry into the top-tier horsepower league, but instead it became a cautionary tale of overreach, leaving farmers with a hulking, unreliable beast that few dared to keep running for long. Number 11. The Alice Chalmers Model G is often remembered with quirky fondness, but from a practical standpoint, it was deeply flawed and poorly suited for anything beyond the most niche farming tasks. Released in the late 1940s, it featured a tiny rear-mounted four-cylinder engine from a Crossley car, delivering a meager 10 horsepower, barely enough to pull its own weight, let alone accomplish real fieldwork. The unconventional rear engine, front implement layout was innovative in theory, but awkward in practice. The front-mounted tools blocked visibility, and the tractor lacked the weight and traction to handle anything tougher than cultivating soft vegetable beds. Its ultra-light construction made it prone to slipping, and the lack of a three-point hitch or hydraulics severely limited versatility. Farmers needing more robust equipment quickly grew frustrated with the G's limited capabilities, and its oddball design meant it couldn't share parts or implements with other machines. Despite its simplicity, even basic repairs could be tedious due to the cramped layout. It sold poorly outside of specialized markets and quickly became obsolete as more powerful and adaptable tractors entered the scene. While it earns points for creativity, the Model G ultimately proved that innovation without real-world usability leads to a tractor more charming than useful. Number 10. The early versions of the Case IH7140, part of the first-generation Magnum series, launched in the late 1980s, were far from the bulletproof machines they would later become. While the overall design held promise, the initial rollout was marred by rushed production and unresolved engineering flaws. The transmission, a full power shift, was ahead of its time, but plagued by calibration issues and abrupt shifting that could jolt both tractor and operator under load. Hydraulic systems were underwhelming in responsiveness, especially for farmers transitioning from more refined Deere setups. The cab, though spacious for the era, suffered from poor sealing, leading to dust infiltration and excessive noise levels that undermined the supposed comfort improvements. Fuel economy with the Cummins engine wasn't bad, but early models had turbo and injector quirks that led to inconsistent performance and frustrating downtime. Build quality varied from unit to unit. Some suffered from electrical gremlins, while others experienced premature wear in the rear end under heavy tillage. While the Magnum legacy would later be defined by durability and power, the 7140's early iterations fell short of expectations and left many operators feeling like unpaid test drivers for an unfinished product. It took years of refinement to turn the 7140 into the legend it eventually became. Number 9. The Porsche Diesel Jr. 108 might look like a charming relic today, but when judged by the standards of real-world farming in its time, it was painfully inadequate. Produced from the mid-1950s through the early 1960s, it featured a single-cylinder, air-cooled diesel engine that pushed out a mere 15 horsepower. Barely enough for light cultivation, and certainly not enough for anything beyond the smallest market gardens. Starting the engine was often a frustrating ritual, especially in cold weather, with glow plugs that took forever to warm and a hand crank option that felt outdated even then. Its slow speed and extremely limited gear range made it impractical for hauling or transport, and early models lacked even basic hydraulic lift systems, severely restricting implement use. The ride quality was rough due to the chattering single-cylinder engine, which also produced intense vibration and ear-rattling noise at anything close to working RPMs. Maintenance was another chore. Parts availability outside Europe was minimal, and Porsche's engineering quirks meant even simple fixes could turn into time-consuming headaches. The control layout was cramped and far from intuitive, making long hours uncomfortable and inefficient. While collectors may now celebrate the 108 for its Porsche badge and retro appeal, the truth is it was never more than a novelty, completely outmatched by the workhorses of its era. Number 8. The Kubota B7100, introduced in the mid-1970s, is often praised for its compact size and reliability, but a closer look reveals a tractor riddled with compromises that made it frustrating for anything beyond the lightest duties. Its tiny 3-cylinder diesel engine put out just 16 horsepower, which sounds usable until you try to do anything more demanding than mowing or light tilling. Then the lack of torque and power becomes glaringly obvious. The gear transmission, with no shuttle shift or hydrostatic option in early versions, was clunky and slow, especially for loader work where frequent direction changes are critical. Operator comfort was nearly non-existent. A narrow, hard seat, poor ergonomics, and constant vibration from the high-revving engine made long hours a literal pain. The tractor's light weight, while great for turf, meant poor traction in real soil work, leading to wheel spin in stalled implements unless conditions were perfect. The tiny frame also limited implement compatibility, and owners frequently ran into trouble finding properly sized attachments that wouldn't overpower the B7100's modest hydraulics. Add to that a narrow stance and low ground clearance, and stability became a real concern on uneven terrain. While the B7100 carved out a niche for hobbyists and gardeners, anyone expecting real farm utility quickly found it more toy than tool. Number 7. The Deutz DX160 was meant to be a flagship of German engineering in the early 1980s, but in practice it often fell far short of its premium image and price tag. While its air-cooled Deutz 6-cylinder engine delivered decent power on paper, around 160 horsepower, the reality was a noisy, temperamental beast that struggled under sustained heavy loads and ran hot in warm climates due to the inherent limitations of air cooling. The transmission, a semi-power shift setup, lacked refinement and was infamous for awkward gear changes that made fieldwork more tedious than it should have been. Hydraulic performance was another weak point, with flow rates that lagged behind competitors and sluggish response times that frustrated anyone using modern implements. The cab, though futuristic in design, was let down by poor fit and finish. Rattles, drafts, and inadequate soundproofing meant that long hours inside were far from the luxury Deutz advertised. Worse still, parts were expensive and hard to source, especially outside of Europe, and electronic gremlins in the control systems only added to the headaches. The DX160 looked like a technological leap, but underneath the styling was a tractor that never quite delivered on reliability, comfort, or ease of ownership. It ended up being more of a maintenance burden than a productivity booster, and many owners eventually soured on its promise. Number 6. The John Deere 8630 was supposed to be a powerhouse in the four-wheel drive market during the late 1970s. but it quickly earned a reputation as one of Deere's most frustrating missteps. Powered by a turbocharged 415 cubic inch inline-six engine, it looked solid on paper, but the engine was overstressed and its wet sleeves had a tendency to shift, leading to catastrophic coolant leaks and eventual engine failure. Worse, it shared this flawed power plant with the smaller two-wheel drive tractors, meaning it was simply not built for the torque demands of heavy four-wheel drive tillage. The transmission, a synchro range setup, was outdated and clunky for a tractor in this power class, making smooth operation a challenge. Its articulation system was twitchy at speed and caused poor stability when hauling heavy implements. Inside, the cab was noisy, visibility was poor due to the massive hood, and comfort levels lagged behind competitors like Versatile and Steiger. Repairs were both frequent and expensive, and downtime became the norm rather than the exception. Farmers who invested in the 8630 hoping for Deere durability were often left with bitter disappointment and steep repair bills. For all its brand prestige, the 8630 proved that even the Green Giant could stumble hard when it pushed design beyond what its components could reliably handle. Number 5. The versatile 1150 Big Roy may be one of the most iconic-looking tractors ever built, but behind the jaw-dropping size and bold styling was a machine that fell flat in almost every functional category. Built in 1977 as a one-off prototype, it featured a 12-cylinder Cummins engine producing over 600 horsepower. Yet all that muscle was undermined by poor design decisions and engineering overreach. The rear-mounted engine created major cooling challenges and terrible weight distribution, making traction inconsistent and field performance sluggish despite the power. Visibility from the enormous front cab was dreadful, especially to the rear where all the implement action was happening, making it difficult to monitor equipment or reverse with any confidence. Maintenance was another nightmare. With the engine buried behind the cab and shielding panels everywhere, simple repairs became a time-consuming ordeal. Its sheer size made transportation a logistical headache, and it was far too heavy for most real-world farming conditions, leading to severe soil compaction. While it turned heads at shows and represented a bold what-if moment in tractor history, Big Roy was ultimately more spectacle than solution. A massive, complex, impractical machine that proves sometimes bigger really isn't better. Number 4. The International Harvester 560 stands as one of the most infamous failures in tractor history, not because of what it aimed to be, but because of what it inherited. Released in 1958, the 560 looked like a modern, high-powered upgrade with sleek styling and more horsepower. But IH made the critical mistake of building it on the same outdated rear-end platform used in earlier models like the M and Super M. That rear end was never designed to handle the 50-plus horsepower the new six-cylinder engines produced, and under heavy loads, the final drives and differentials failed, often catastrophically. Farmers expecting a workhorse got a lemon that broke down under normal use, turning what should have been a flagship into a field liability. Even worse, International was slow to admit the flaw, damaging its reputation and opening the door for John Deere to surge ahead with the new generation tractors. The 560's hydraulics were also behind the times, and while the torque amplifier was a selling point, it frequently became a service point due to reliability issues. The cabless design offered zero protection or comfort, and even the control layout felt rushed. While later fixes helped reduce failures, the damage was already done. The 560 wasn't just a flawed tractor, it was the mistake that cost IH its lead in the farm equipment race. Number 3. The Kletric HG may have looked like a tough little crawler when it rolled out in the late 1930s, but beneath its rugged appearance was a machine that struggled to meet even modest expectations. Designed as a lightweight track tractor for small farms and orchards, it was powered by a tiny 4-cylinder engine producing just under 20 horsepower, barely enough to pull small implements, and quickly overwhelmed in anything resembling tough soil. The track system, while providing traction in theory, was prone to stretching and derailment, especially without constant adjustment. Steering required clunky clutch and brake coordination that wore out operators as much as components, and turning on soft or uneven terrain often caused one track to dig in and bog down. Maintenance was a regular chore, not just due to wear, but because many components were poorly sealed, allowing dust and grit to invade vital parts. Comfort was non-existent. No suspension, no cab, and a metal seat bolted to the frame guaranteed a punishing ride. And while it was compact, its low ground clearance made it easy to hang up on field debris or furrows. The HG's wartime surplus reputation may have boosted sales post-WWI, but on the farm it often proved underpowered, finicky, and just plain exhausting to run. For many owners, it was more novelty than necessity. Number 2. The John Deere 2010 is remembered not for innovation or performance, but as one of the most disappointing tractors the company ever built. Introduced in the early 1960s as part of the new generation lineup, the 2010 was supposed to modernize Deere's mid-size offerings, but it quickly earned a reputation for mechanical failure and poor design. Its engine, whether gas or diesel, was underpowered and prone to overheating, while the wet sleeve design led to coolant leaks and major reliability issues over time. The transmission was clunky and often failed under moderate load, and the hydraulics, especially in the row crop and utility versions, were underdeveloped, leading to slow response and frequent breakdowns. Worse yet, the 2010's steering and brake systems were notorious for failing unpredictably, making field work not just frustrating, but sometimes unsafe. Even routine maintenance was a hassle, with cramped component placement and parts that wore out quickly. Many mechanics consider it one of the worst Deere designs to service, and parts availability became an issue as Deere quietly distanced itself from the model. In an era when competitors were raising the bar, the 2010 stumbled badly, earning a legacy not of progress, but of persistent problems and unmet expectations. It's a tractor most owners were glad to see the back of. Number 1. The Ford 6000 was meant to be a leap forward in the early 1960s tractor market, but instead it became one of Ford's most embarrassing mechanical failures. Launched with great fanfare as their first factory-built 6-cylinder row crop tractor, it featured the innovative but deeply flawed Select O-Speed power shift transmission, which was plagued by jerky shifts, unreliable clutch packs, and electronic gremlins that left operators stranded in the field. Early engines suffered from poor oil circulation and internal stress that led to cracked blocks and catastrophic failures, many within just a few hundred hours of use. Hydraulic systems were sluggish and inconsistent, and the rear end couldn't reliably handle the advertised power without excessive wear. Worse still, the tractor had awkward ergonomics with a confusing control layout and a stiff ride that made long days a chore. Ford attempted a quiet recall and re-release of the Commander 6000 after a full redesign, but the damage to its reputation was already done. Dealers struggled to move them, parts support remained shaky, and owners often traded them in at a loss. Instead of becoming a leader in innovation, the Ford 6000 became a cautionary tale, a high-tech gamble that backfired spectacularly, earning its place as one of the most regrettable tractors of its era.